Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to iTeach Live, our daily web series in which iTeach is just trying to connect with teachers around the nation to hear about their stories, their background, and then how they're navigating through the classroom currently and even before this COVID-19 kind of struck us, of how they've been experiencing the classroom, and see what we can glean from them, from parents to teachers to students, whoever's watching this. Hopefully we find a lot of helpful information. To that end, we have Warren this morning joining us. He is a teacher down in Louisiana. How are you doing this morning?
Happy to be here.
Well, happy to have you. I know everyone's schedule is kind of crazy and sporadic, and so I appreciate you taking 30 minutes out of your day to sit down and chat with us. I wanted to talk, I know a little bit about your story and kind of where you're at now, but before we jump into that, I wanted to talk about kind of how you got into teaching. Was it something you grew up wanting to do, or is this something that changed along the way? How did you choose teaching?
Yeah, well, it's funny because there are a bunch of different times it took a turn. I played football in college and I studied art. And the only reason I studied art is because I was such a terrible student. I knew that was the only way that I was going to stay eligible to stay on the field, right? And so one thing I did know is that I wanted football to be part of my life forever. And so I just figured, okay, well, let me get this degree and then I'll go teach PE, because anybody can teach PE, right? And then one of my painting teachers had been a baseball player at the University of Texas in Austin. And he said that his goal was to play baseball professionally and then paint in the off season. But then the people he met during his art endeavors, he found so much more interesting than the people he met during sports endeavors. And then I started thinking, so he said he really wanted to do a little more, be around the art people a little bit more. And I really thought to myself, like, I loved all my teammates and everything, but I wasn't really great friends with a lot of them. I was like, well, that's me. So maybe I need to be teaching art. So when I went to get my master's in teaching, the classes that I took were with other teachers who were currently teaching, and they were working toward their master's, so they get pay raise or whatever. But all they did was complain. It was incredible. And I had worked in an art museum as an educator previously. And so I said, well, I'm not going to get certified. I'm just going to take my Master of Arts in Teaching, and I'm going to go try to do museum education because I know I love that stuff. And those are very, very hard to get, extremely hard to get, especially when you're low on the ladder in terms of experience. And so the one thing that came open before a museum job, there was a local teaching job. And so when I got into that, I realized, like, this is so much more intense. This is so much more meaningful. You can go so much deeper into the material. This is what I need to do. And the other thing is I can coach football tied in with the same job. And so yeah, I really have kind of made it my calling since then.
That's a great story, how you've intertwined kind of your passion for sports and art into one job role, especially since they're so different, right? Yep. Football and art, teaching, it seems like to be the only profession in which that's actually possible to do.
That's absolutely right. Yes.
So, and good on you for finding a way to mix both your passions together. So you said you found yourself into a classroom. You started in a charter school, is that right?
No, actually, I started in Episcopal school.
Okay. And then how long were you there?
I was there for 3.5 years.
Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So in the Episcopal school, did they require certification?
Not at all. Anybody with a degree who met well with the administration, they could bring them on. Yeah.
Perfect. What was the precipice then? Because obviously you've earned teacher certification at this point. If you didn't need it to stay in your school and continue teaching, what was the reason, or what spurred you on to actually seek out a certification?
Well, what had happened was I taught for about 10 years, and then found myself on the outs with a school called Holy Cross, which I really enjoyed. And so I had the opportunity to either go right back into another classroom at another school, or maybe increase my profile a little, the value of my profile a little bit by doing something that I really needed to and should have done, which is get certified. So there's plenty of sub work to do all over the city all of the time. So I figured, well, I'll just be a sub and I'll work on my certification while I'm doing that. It was great because I'd be paid for going to work every day. But since you didn't do much teaching, I'd be doing all my iteach work while I was subbing. And so got that completed, in under a year, and then, considered myself much better armed to go back out in the market and get the job that I wanted.
And were you able to get that job you wanted?
I was. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the one that I wanted, I definitely nailed it.
And so the job that you wanted, what did it entail? So you were an art teacher, and then you were a football coach, or tell me about kind of the structure of that day.
So I went to this charter school that was in my neighborhood, and like I'm a big advocate of cycling, and so I could ride my bike to work, and I was what I thought serving the community in which I lived a lot more, and then I was going to have complete and total autonomy within the department, and then I actually coached with at another school after I was done with my teaching duties at the charter school where I was working. What was really incredible about the whole situation is, as hard as I worked to really get that job, it did not meet my expectations. It was not the place for me, not slightly. And that was evident, I would say, after about 10 minutes.
Really?
With the group.
Yeah.
It was kind of unbelievable, yes.
So you found that it's not the right spot for you. How long were you there? Did you transition
I was there for
out the
1
next
year.
year?
Yeah, I was there for 1 year, and I went right back to parochial school after that. Took an $8,000 pay cut to it.
So your experience has been charter parochial. Have you spent any time in the public schools, or?
So the charter school was a public school.
Gotcha.
I mean, I'm not sure how you distinguish between the two. It's receives state federal funding, and there's no tuition charged or anything like that, and it's open enrollment. But it was just Louisiana at post Hurricane Katrina, especially in New Orleans, it's just almost all charter, and so they just operate independent of the school board. At the time, I think they've rejoined the school board.
Was it part of the recovery school district?
No, and I don't really. I'm not knowledgeable enough about the logistics of the recovery to tell you exactly how that worked. All I know is that they worked independently and then received federal and state funding per student.
Yeah, I would love to speak to the person who actually understands the depth of the recovery school district, because you and I both, that's a complex structure they have there to support some of those at-risk schools.
Absolutely.
Now, you have taken a hiatus from teaching recently. Tell me about that.
Mm-hmm. Well, so as I said, I went back to a parochial school after that charter school. And then it took them 2 years to figure out that their enrollment did not support what it would cost them to have 2 art teachers on the payroll. And so since I was the most recent hire, I was the casualty. And it was really, really, really heartbreaking because I was very happy at Archbishop Rummel High School. And so I had 3 chances the next year to go back into other classrooms. And by this time, I really, really had a very specific idea about what was the right environment for me, because I did not want to be miserable the way I was at that charter school. And so I just said to myself, well, I'm not going to take another this job is too demanding for me to be unhappy in it. And so I decided I'm not going to take another teaching job until I know that this is the right one. So as I said, there were 3 different schools where I could have worked, and none of them really fit what I really knew was best for me. So I've passed on it for a while and have gotten into interpretation of a lot of historic material here that's offered in the city of New Orleans at many of the cultural institutions. I've done really well with that and been able to coach in addition with a big, huge football program here in town. But problem is it's 2 part-time jobs working together, and life that complicated isn't very attractive for very long, right? So an opportunity just came available for me to be the athletic director and PE teacher at a small little elementary Catholic school here in town And I knew that that would be the right environment for me, and I could get a little bit more stable work profile. And so I went ahead and took it.
Well, I'm glad you're back in the teaching profession and finding a
Very
way to
likely.
combine those two passions yet again. You know, I'm not sure who is watching this right now or who will be watching this, but you brought up a point that I think might be really valuable to prospective teachers trying to get into the field. There's a tension between, so if a new teacher is coming to iteach, there's this idea that they just need to take a job. So whatever they get their plan of study for, let's go out, apply that first job offer. I think there's a kind of a sense of desire just to take it. Like, let's just go ahead and get that first job. Through your experiences, though, you've been able to identify schools, administrations, et cetera, that fit for you. You just spoke about 3 schools and you knew those wouldn't be good fits for you. And so when we think about the way teachers can remain in a school and have good tenure at a school and teacher retention in general, that fit is super important. You've identified it in your current spot, which congratulations to you. But I want to hear about, like, what advice or what do you look for? How can you, using your experience, tell other people that might be looking into teaching, like, how to be discerning and just jumping into that first teaching position?
Well, it's really, really hard, especially if you're young, because if you're coming from all your preparation, your preparatory work for it to enter the workplace, such as college, whatever the certification program, whatever it might be, you don't really know yourself as an employee. You kind of take everything you like and don't like for granted. But you don't realize just how important those things are for you to be able to do the best job you possibly can, right? So for example, when I first started teaching, I couldn't believe how many times I'd have to stop and go back and re-explain stuff, or how many times a kid would come to me while I was in the middle of trying to help somebody else and ask me about something that had nothing to do with what we were doing. And things like that would happen. And that's part of the job. You can't get around that. But I didn't deal with it well at all. And so what I started to learn over the years is that I perform best with minimal confusion. And so I'm going to have to create that environment. I'm going to have to put it upon myself to make sure that my kids are not confused and everybody knows exactly what they're supposed to do so that I can do the best job that I can do. But I don't know that I was able to gain that perspective until I had been in it and been forced to reflect on why things went wrong the way they did. I would say that no matter where you are, even if all the structure in the school is favorable to you, it is still a very, very difficult job. And when you don't have the experience to like really be able to see where you're going to step in a hole, then the best thing you can do is simply learn. Baptism by fire. And you want to be able to stay at the right place for the wrong time, for as long as possible. And my wife has been teaching for 26 years in the same school throughout her career.
Wow.
She's been very, very fortunate, and I admire her so much on that premise. But that's not possible for everybody. And we'd like to say it is, but some people are just not adaptable in that way. And that's no shot on those people that, where it doesn't work out. Just, you have so many different factors contributing to what what ends up being sustainable. And you really have to reflect very deeply on what works for you and what doesn't before you take a job like this, because once you're in there, you're in, and there's no stopping. The only thing that you can do is just walk out on anybody if you don't like it, and that's really not an option,
Yeah.
And so I'm sorry I don't have better advice about how to pick the first school where you go. The trick is, how do I get hired? And if you don't have any experience, then you can't say, well, no, I'm not going to take this one because I think I can do better.
Yeah.
You really just have to go in, give it the best possible effort you can, and then try and learn from it. If you're fortunate, then you'll want to keep going back.
Yeah, no, I think there's some really good advice embedded in there for sure. What I took away from you, and correct me if I totally misinterpreted, but it seems like one of the crucial things for a first year teacher to do above or with a lot of other responsibilities they have, is to keep on self-reflecting. So during that first year, understand, because you were able to identify very specific things within your classroom that you felt detracted from your ability to be the best teacher. And so that takes some pretty acute reflection to understand exactly, because what's impressive what you just said is you didn't say you were frustrated with your students. You were able to say these specific things caused me to be held back. And so you created fences, barriers, expectations in the classroom that allowed, I'm sure if you're working one-on-one, your students expect to not interrupt you when you're working one-on-one, because you're able to reflect very acutely and finely on those things. And so one of the things I took away from what you just said is, as a first year teacher, you might not be in the job of your dreams, but by self-reflecting, you can start identifying what the job of your dreams might look like and what structures need to be in place, or even what autonomy or freedom you need to have in the classroom to be successful. And the other thing that I took away from you just now was the idea of creating your own structure. And so finding a position, if it's not already there, in which you have the ability and freedom to work within that classroom and create it. So maybe that first job a teacher gets might not be what they think is their dream job, but through reflection and creating structure, there's the things enough to make it a really good job that you can stay at for a long time because of some of the initiatives the teacher might take within their own classroom. Did I miss that completely, or how close was I?
Not at all. That's perfect. And you really want to stay in the same job for as long as you can. I would say that when I entered teaching, I looked at a lot of the things at this one school, and I always said to myself, in a couple of years I'm going to be at this school and I'm going to be doing this job. But the fact of the matter is, the school where I started is still there, and there are teachers that worked with me in my first year, or the year there before I was, and they are still there, and they have kind of cemented a legacy that makes the job that much more valuable to them. This thing that they're doing every single day. And the more, and the longer you stay, the more valuable you become to the institution, and you don't have to deal with the uncertainty of these very weak at-will contracts that you get annually. I feel like I'm starting to kind of ramble off course, but you do want to stay in a job for as long as you possibly can. If I look at what my wife has compiled in her retirement profile, I'll never catch that, because I keep starting over, different plans, different deductions, or, whatever it might be.
Yeah, that's certainly the ideal. I know some people I talk to, and they're thinking about getting in the teaching profession. They have a very specific job in mind. They want to teach third grade under this principal at this school. And I think that's great. To have that ideal is fantastic. What I usually tell them is get a teaching job and get some experience, because the things you just talked about, creating structure and reflection and kind of understanding yourself as a teacher better, that comes across in interviews, and it comes across in your ability to ascertain the position. So maybe that third grade position at the school of your dreams under that principal you love is not immediately available. That's not to say that you can't get into an elementary job in another school and really start to gain some really good experience. Yes, you might miss out on some of the fringe benefits that you just alluded to, but there also could be some really beneficial times as cultivating you as a teacher that you can move laterally then in. So when that dream position that you can now really define comes open, you're a fully certified teacher with some years of experience to interview for that job. And then you might have a competitive edge trying to get that later down the road. And so, yeah, I do agree. Staying with the school as long as possible is certainly the ideal and something we should all work for. But there's also, you don't want to miss the opportunity just to get into the school and start teaching, to really learn yourself as a teacher more and more. It's just, I think you just have to maximize that experience and then not take it for granted or be saddened that you're not in a different position, because you can still make the most out of that current position.
Yeah, I agree. And the other thing that you can never forget about is if you do the best job you can to adapt to the position, you might surprise yourself at how happy you are. Like I said, I was trying desperately to get in the museum field. And so I took the art teaching job as and I couldn't find anything else. I found this, and it changed everything for me.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, you still have students that you're teaching. So as much as you're thinking through your professional acceleration or evolution, it might not be the job of your dreams or whatever. Maybe structures might not be in place, or contracts all of that can be going on. But obviously when you enter that classroom, you have students to impact, and they're looking to you for consistency and balance. And that's something you don't want to lose sight of, even though in your mind you're thinking bigger picture about where my professional life is at that moment.
Yeah, well, it is important that you stay mindful of both, but I think more important that you stay mindful of what you have right in front of you.
Absolutely. You mentioned one of people in your past being a coach at UT and using the off season to his advantage. It seems like, although school doesn't have necessarily a season like sports, you do have an on season through the school year, and then you have your summers off. And so I'm going to make the assumption that appealed to you, but tell me more about just the actual practicality of a teacher schedule that you like.
Oh, it's just fantastic. I mean, here's the thing: is I never want to, as I'm saying this, I never want anybody to get the idea that oh, I like time off. No, I actually prefer working. Right, I love it. But it is so exhausting. It really is, and there aren't many professions that will give you as much time off as teachers get. You work 8 months out of the year when you add up all of the vacations and all. I mean, I've never seen a contract that's structured to not pay you through the time that you don't work. And I mean, what a great disposition. And so that means that you have not just a week at a time to cram in some other kind of interest. You have months at a time. If there's something else that you would like to maybe give a little bit more attention, you have that opportunity. Most professions, albeit maybe more lucrative, do not give you that opportunity. And if okay, you're not going to make a lot of money teaching, but as far as having an enriched life, teaching allows you to do that. Now, as far as the daily schedule works, I mean, that's probably my favorite part. Now, any parents would probably be able to really understand where I'm coming from, and that the weekend is not restful. The weekend is not restful. All you're doing is trying with other members of your family to agree on how we're going to spend our time. And invariably, there will be all kind of fights that break out about little things, and you never know if your plan is going to hold up or you're going to get to do what you want to do. Well, if you teach, you're doing what you want to do. And so when I show up on Monday, especially at the parochial school, I would just run around the campus saying, thank God it's Monday. Thank God it's Monday. Because now here's a schedule and you have to stick to it. There is no getting around it. It's already been decided. And you just need to give it all you can. And then you get home and you spend time with your family. You relax for a little while and, just try and calm down a little bit before it's time to go to bed and start the process all over again. But when and then also you're done with your school day at 3:30. If you're lucky enough to coach, I consider that an immense privilege. And what happens is you're stuck in this classroom all day, and it's breakneck pace, it's nonstop. Everybody's coming and going. If you're really doing your job, then you are on. And then dismissal comes, and no, you can't decompress. You got to get out to the field and coach. But what a great thing. You get out of the classroom, you get the sunshine, you get the fresh air. You're talking to the kids in a completely different scope. Yeah. And a lot of people say like, oh, all this stuff carries over. I don't find that it carries over at all. You're talking to them for totally different, goals. The means are completely different to reach the ends that are completely different. The kids are all of a sudden more excited about what they're going to do for you than they were in the classroom. And you completely change spectrums, and it's so refreshing. And so like I would coach football in the fall, and then I would have nothing in the winter, and then I'd do track and field in the spring. Well, so I didn't have time to hang around the classroom and do my extra work, which we all have all of the time, in the fall or in the spring. In the winter, I did. So in the winter, I'd find myself staying after school sometimes 2-3 hours just to try and get ahead or try and get to where I needed to be. But the strange thing was that during the fall, I had the same amount of work to do, but I wasn't I wasn't stuck in the classroom hours and hours and hours after school, and I was still getting my work done. And I still to this day can't figure out how all the time adds up. But coaching is just great. And so you put those two in together, every week is just glorious, depending on your environment. If you love the people that you are around, that's teachers, that's students, that's maintenance staff, everybody, then you are so motivated toward making this school the best place that it can be. And I can't think of a better way to spend a workday, spend a life.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like just your passions and your dispositions, teaching and coaching. I mean, what a fantastic fit. And I will reiterate one of the points you made, in that sometimes the stigma of teachers is, oh, we get summers off, right? And yes, that's true. That is fundamentally true. But at the same token, there is like a needed respite for teachers, because like you said, like weekends, you can't catch 100% back up. And as a good teacher, like it sounds like that you are providing that energy. It's exhausting. I mean, and it compounds. And so when June comes around and the school year's off, or mid-May, or whatever your schedule is, there's a sigh of relief that I think teachers have earned, and that they can enjoy their break with not feeling guilty that, oh, I'm not working and getting a paycheck, because you've put in the work. And a lot of times the hours, if you were to annualize it, I mean, are a year's worth of work when you think about how all the overtime and extra hours that aren't getting clocked during the school year. And so I'm all for teachers getting as much breaks and summers off as possible, because I want, when August kicks around, for them to be, recovered and rested to enter back into that new crop of students coming in and provide that energy. I'm looking at the clock right now, and man, time's flown by. But real fast, I would like you indulge me just a couple more minutes about what you're doing now. Like what's changed? What's just the current environment we're in, where schools are shut down? What's been the greatest impact to you? Has there been any unrealized wins or challenges going on right now?
So like I said, my wife is a teacher, and I'm home a lot. The cultural institutions are closed, and then we have to kind of shuffle my son through the day. He's in fourth grade. I cannot believe how hard my wife has had to work through this whole thing. I mean, it is just mind blowing. And given the fact that she's, kind of stuck same four walls with her computer all the time. One of the things that you don't realize is, just by getting those kids to show up, they are doing so much more work for you than you realize, just by showing up. You don't have to coordinate all these people coming into your screen for your Zoom meeting or Google Meet or whatever it is. You know? And so chasing them down can be so frustrating, because you can't just look around the schoolyard and find somebody. You have to hope that they show up, and sometimes they're not. But if they're if they're at school, there's nothing else for them to be doing. They do show up. But not having had the classes myself, it's a little bit harder for me to reflect. Watching the process play out, I can definitely see that this is not the ideal situation for us to be in.
Yeah. And hats off to your wife and the other teachers that have been just pursuing these students so diligently and faithfully to ensure that they are showing up to class, and in the midst of not having a classroom, to still show that level of care to the students. I mean, my hope is that they're going to remember this for a long time, but they take away that teachers, cared and went that extra mile to show that the care is not limited to the bounds of the classroom. That with coaching, your care for your students isn't when they're seated in a desk. It goes to the field and the court and the track. And so even still, I think now teachers are still showing that care for their students, not just their learning, but their well-being right now. And so hats off to you and your family and the other teachers out there doing such a good job.
Thank you.
Warren, we are up against the time. I want to be respectful of yours. And so thank you very much for coming on board. I wish you the best and your teaching pursuits and your coaching career, and that's super fulfilling for you.
All right, and I think y'all run a great operation, by the way. I don't know if I ever got the chance to tell y'all that, but
I appreciate that.
It's I mean, since I signed on back in I guess that was 2014, been very impressed with not only the way that the process plays out to get that certification, but also the follow-up support that y'all give. So keep going with it.
Wow, I appreciate it.
Y'all to several people. So yeah.
Thank you very much. We'll continue trying to do our best.
All right, take care.
Thank you.